Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 115, Not Without My Nanny. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Gracie's classmate invited her to spend term break with his family in the Middle East. Maxwell quickly rejects Fran's suggestion that Niles accompany Gracie so that she and Maxwell could call each other Fran and Max in every room of the house. So into the desert, Fran and Gracie go. In Khorasan, Fran catches the Sultan's attention and he asks her to stay with him forever. Fran, somewhat reluctantly, turns him down because she's involved with Mr. Sheffield or Maxwell. After her refusal, the airplane tickets, passports, and Fran's clothing all disappear. Fran and Gracie unsuccessfully try to escape the palace dressed as belly dancers. Meanwhile, Maxwell misses Fran and feels guilty about rejecting her overtures, and Niles tricks Cece into giving Maxwell an early birthday present, namely an airplane ticket to Khorasan. Maxwell, in Khorasan, walks into the palace because he has an uncanny resemblance to the Sultan, who tells Fran that she's free to leave and that it was a good time for her to do so then, since he had no romantic interest in her whatsoever, but only wanted her to stay on as his nanny. Fran protests to Maxwell that the king wanted her, and he agrees, recognizing that even if she started as the Sultan's nanny, eventually she'd be on a first-name basis with him, and then one day he'd come to realize that she was more important to him than his work, and then he'd tell her that he loves her. Maxwell then takes that opportunity to tell Fran that he loves her. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
And then they kiss.
Yes, and then they kiss. Good addition.
Yep.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
Nope, you've got it. So, again, we start out this episode in the kitchen. Fran's at the counter pouring some coffee or something. Maxwell comes down the side stairs. And Maxwell says, "Good afternoon, Miss Fine." And Fran's like, "Good afternoon, Mr. Sheffield." And then she kind of like, it's like, the kids are at school. Niles is shopping. We could do it. And Maxwell clears his throat. "All right. Hi, Fran." And Fran, of course, goes, "Hi, Max." And they're like looking at each other, gazing into each other's eyes. And Max is like, "You look beautiful, Fran." And Fran goes, "Oh, over 40, and you can say it again so quick." Side note,
Yep.
that probably went over your head as a child, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
So at this time, Brighton breaks up their moment because he comes in through the back kitchen door, and and they try to cover quickly by Maxwell pretending to get an eyelash off of Fran's face. And Brian's like, "Oh, good cover there, Max."
Oh, no, that's
And
Brighton.
sorry, that's Brighton. Yeah. Um, Good cover there, Max. And Brian's like, "Who told you about the first name thing?" And Brian's like, "The guy that owns the fruit stand." And Max is like, "The guy who owns a fruit stand? How the hell does he know?" At that moment, Niles walks in the side kitchen door with a bag of fruit. And he announces that, "I'm making ambrosia tonight." Um, at this point, Gracie walks in through the swinging kitchen door, and she's like, "Guess what? My friend Billy invited me to spend term break with him and his family in the Middle East." And, Maxwell's like, "Oh, that's so exciting. His father's royalty. He's the Sultan of Khorasan." And Fred's like, "Wow, gee, I wonder if he knows my cousin Barry, the waterbed king." Side note, I don't think so.
Probably not, no.
But anyway, so Gracie's asking if she can go, and Max is like, "Well, it's so far away." And Fran's like, "Oh, I know Maggie and Brighton have travel plans, but we'll have a good time here. The house will be empty. It would be, your father, me, you." I don't think Niles has ever been to the Middle East. And Maxwell immediately is like, "No, not Niles. I need him here. I have a mountain of work to do." Uh, Miss Fine, why don't you go with her? Fran
Mhm.
laughs awkwardly and she says to Gracie, "Excuse me, honey." And she goes around to in front of Max and goes, "I think this little girl will be very disappointed if she uh, doesn't, or if she doesn't go with Niles." And Maxwell's like, "Grace has never been anywhere with Niles." And Fran points to herself, "This little girl." Um, and then she kind of redirects her focus to Gracie and is like, "Honey, honey, honey, go upstairs. I'll talk with your father." So Gracie leaves, and Fran says to Maxwell, "Obviously, I'm being too subtle here, but with the kids out of the house, we could call each other Fran and Max in every room of the house." Again,
Mhm.
you would not have picked up on that innuendo as a child.
Hopefully
Um,
not.
mhm. Maxwell, however, is like tempting as that sounds, Fran. And did you know he did call her Fran there? Um, this is a very busy time for me. And he explains he has some investors to entertain, and he would like to serve them something other than Gino's pizza rolls. And
Mhm.
Fran's like, "One brunch, and I'm branded for life." Um, and then again, she goes on like, "I don't understand why you don't want to spend time with me." And Max was like, "Wait, who said I don't want to spend time with you? I have to learn a living." Friend's like, "Ah." And Max was like, "That's right. I have expenses. This year alone, my food bill doubled." And Friend's like, "Now, please, let's not bring my mother into this."
Mhm.
Max, God. And then Friend's like, "I guess I'm going back to the desert, but I might not return that quickly. Our people tend to dilly dally there." Max was like, "Fran, come on." And Fran's like, "Miss Fine." And she leaves. At this moment, Cece walks in from the kitchen door. She's like, "Ooh, you and Nanny Fine are having a big old fight about shipping her off to the Middle East." And Maxwell's like, "Who told you that?" And Cece's like, "The garbage man." And then at this time, Niles comes in from the back kitchen door holding like a trash can. So word
Mhm.
gets around fast.
Apparently, no one has
I'm
anything better to
also
do.
I'm also surprised though that Cece deigned to speak with the garbage man in the first place.
Yeah, she didn't have to speak to him. He could have spoken to her.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
her to pay attention, I should
fair.
say. She still doesn't know the kids' names.
True. True.
But yeah, anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Can you take us to the royal palace?
Sure. So now we're in Coruscant, and where Fran and Gracie are following I want to say like bellhop, but I'm not
Hmm.
sure if that's the right term. Someone who
Yeah.
works at the palace um, around, and Fran is just saying to Gracie that I just keep running this fight that I had with your father over and over again in my mind, and I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to have a good time. And then like, they walk in, and she looks around. Wow, is this place drop dead gorgeous? This is even more beautiful than the Taj Mahal. And Gracie's like, Fran, when were you in India? And Fran's like, he opened another one in India. And yeah, it's a very short scene unless you consider this in the next one scene.
I went ahead and counted it both just because
Okay,
it was short.
sure. So the bellhop, brings them to their room and says to Fran, "This is your room. Miss Grace's room is connected through that door." And they walk in, and Fran looks around. Wow, you guys really went out all out at the Bombay Company. And so their bellhop tells them that His Majesty the Sultan is expecting you for dinner, and he requests that you both wear traditional garb, which you will find in your closets. So they open the door, the armoire, and oh boy! And Fran starts looking at them. Do you have anything that breathes a little bit? Because I know it's a dry heat, but at 117 degrees, any way you look at it, it's a schwitz.
Hmm.
And that's the scene.
Yep.
Do you have anything you
Um,
want to add?
no. Uh, it kind of picks up because they were told that they need to dress in traditional garb. So
Mm-hmm.
the next time we see them, they are dressed up. And Fran is, telling Gracie, "If I die tomorrow," and immediately Gracie goes, How do you say it?
Toy, toy, toy.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Fran continues, I can honestly say I was treated like royalty. And she's talking about how they napped in satin. I think there was like, was it lavender infused or something infused sheets,
Water.
but
Yeah.
water and like even, you know, with different like language or culture, like Alf remains the same.
Mm-hmm.
That. But anyway, uh, we meet, um, Gracie's friend and then his father. Um,
What did you catch about the Billy?
he one of the kids from before in a previous episode?
I don't think so, but I was getting
Okay.
more at like, he's greeted as Billy and he says, it's tradition, it's customary to call me as Prince Muhammad. And Gracie's
Yeah.
response is, did you catch
Uh,
that?
yeah, we call you Goober there.
Exactly.
Oh wait, so was the okay, so before that, um I mean, Fran goes ahead and takes a picture of like Gracie, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Um
both of them.
yeah. And again, she's asking about like,
Oh, you were totally
who
right. I'm sorry. In my head, I flipped it that like that was the first thing. Sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
like she immediately like takes this like smile, takes a picture. And then again, uh, she's like really like stunned, amazed by the palace and is like wondering who built it. Um and again, I guess it was built in the first dynasty by Ali. And Fran's like, "Oh, do you have a card? My was it a cousin or one of her relatives is wanting to build an island in the kitchen."
Uh huh.
And, and that's when Billy, tells Gracie, really, around here it's customary to call me Prince Muhammad. And Gracie's just like, but we call you like Gooper, at school. That's when King Hassan, Billy's dad, comes in. And of course, there's like big pomp and circumstance with that. And he looks very familiar, as you kind of pointed out in your summary. Um, and again, Fran is just very eager still to take like she's not cowed by it, I don't think, because she immediately is wanting to put the camera on self timer
Mm-hmm.
and have everybody pose to make a great memento.
Right.
And she's eating like cheese. But yeah, do you want to add anything to that scene?
I don't think so.
Okay. So can you take us back to the Sheffield residence?
Sure. So, turns out, even though we thought that the kids, besides Gracie, were going to be out of the house, not entirely accurate since Brighton is sitting right there on the couch watching TV. And Niles comes in carrying a laundry basket and he's like, Master Brighton, just because your vacation plans fell through, you don't have to sit around like a zombie. This is the most exciting city in the world. Go out. The parks, museums, concerts. And Brighton's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Can you move? I can't see Yasmin bleeps butt. And Niles moves and then in walks Maggie, whose plans also seem to have fallen through. And she grabs the remote from him and changes the channel. And Brighton, of course, objects that I was watching that. And she's like, well, now you're watching this. And he's like, you're watching Clueless. Wouldn't that be a little bit redundant? And she's like, well, at least I'm not watching the Women I'll Never Get Within 100 Miles of channel. And they start fighting with each other or bickering with each other in a very childish fashion. And Niles chimes in, that's it, everybody up and out, or I will tell your father that you, oh my God, you kids are dull. Just go out and get something pierced. And then they walk out, and Niles flops down on the couch and puts his feet up. And of course, at that point, Maxwell walks in. He's like, honestly, Niles, am I the only one who doesn't even work around here? Niles stands up and mutters to himself, I'm going to let that pass. And then he says to Maxwell, I know that you're angry because you had a fight with Miss Fine. And Maxwell basically says to him, she has to understand that I can't drop everything just to spend time with her. And Niles is following him towards the door and towards the front door. And Niles is like, right. She has to understand that men are the providers, the warriors, the hunters. Ugh, I'm killing myself. I didn't get the tulips. And then Maxwell asks Niles, well, why can't a woman be more like a man? At that precise moment, in walks Cece, and Niles gestures to her, well, there's your prototype. Do you want to add anything?
Nope.
All right.
I,
Would you like to take us back to the Middle East?
yes. So we're back in the palace, and Fran's actually dancing with the king,
Yes,
and
she
she's
is.
talking about how incredible this day's been, and she can't believe she's dancing with him, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't even know I have a chance." Um, and my notes are a little bit fuzzy here, but Fran says something about loving
Oh, so he says that I didn't even think that I would
the
get a
pit.
chance to dance because when Hosni Mubarak gets a few drinks into me, he becomes quite a chatterbox.
Uh-huh. And then like Fran notices the king's wearing a pin, and she comments about how she loves it. And he's just like, "Oh, well, it's customary here that, if because he offers it to her, right? Like, you love it, here it is." And she's like, "No, no, no." And he explains that it's customary that if a guest loves something, that they get it. And
Mm-hmm.
and so of course Fran jokes, "Oh, pin, I meant palace." Ha 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 ha. Because of
Yup.
course. Um, and then, they're still chatting and walking around. And Fran explains too, again with the pin, it reminds her more of her mother, than for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the king is like, "Oh, then I think I should love your mother." And Fran immediately is like, "Oh, well, then you get her, or you keep her, um, because of that customary thing, right?"
Mm-hmm. And they
So,
laugh.
yep. And Fran again goes on and on about how she's been having such a wonderful time, and how she even, went downtown. They went to the Golden Arches. She really thinks, if they had that, the McShawarma
Mm-hmm.
telling in like New York or something, right?
Yeah.
The king, this entire time, again, is like to the audience seems flirtatious, right? Um, he's talked about how he's really enjoyed her company. And she's talking about how, like, oh, she doesn't want to leave or something. And he's like, "Why don't you stay?" And Farron's like, "Oh, well, I have a restricted ticket." It would be another like $72.50. And Fran's like kind of feeling awkward now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And goes on and says, "No, I mean like live here forever." She's like, "Forever?" And you can tell she's trying to like, because it's an awkward position to be in, right? He's royalty.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a big power imbalance here. So
Yep.
she's trying to think of like a way to like politely kind of get out of it. And so like what she kind of sells on is like, "Oh, I wouldn't be home in time for the last episode of Seinfeld."
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, is there
Cle-
anything you'd like to add to that scene?
Clearly, the last episode of Seinfeld was not going to be aired in Coruscant.
Yes, apparently.
So um, we flipped back to New York and the phone rings and Sylvia answers, "Hello, Sheffield residents." And Fran's like, "Mom, I got to talk to you." Sylvia's like, "How did you know I was here?" Fran's like, "I got calls from Brighton, Maggie, Niles, and Roger Clinton next door. He said his pizza was never delivered." And Sylvia's like, "Well, he should thank me. Chunky runs in that family." And Fran's like, "Mom, I got to tell you something. You're not going to believe it. I think I just got a marriage proposal." And Sylvia's like, "What? You live with a gorgeous millionaire who is this close to a son to me. Who is this Yutz?" Fran's like, "The king of this country." "Is he tall?" "Moss, 6'1" ish. "The point is, I'm in love with Mr. Sheffield. Has he mentioned me? Does he miss me?" And Sylvia's like, "I haven't seen him all week. If I didn't know any better, I would think it was intentional." And then, of course, there's a knock on Fran's door, and Fran's like, Ma, I gotta go. I think that's my lady in waiting bringing me my Diet Pepsi. Bye. Coming. And so she runs to the door, and she opens it. Guess what? It's not her lady in waiting. It's the Sultan. Your
Mhm.
Highness, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I sent a message for you to meet me on the veranda. Oh, you meant my veranda? Because, there's like 200 verandas sticking out of this place. You'll have to be more specific. And he's like, if this is awkward for you, I can leave. And she's like, no, no, you might as well stay. I mean, you've already walked the 2 miles down the corridor to get here. Come on in. And he's like, well, I've come for my answer. Will you stay? And she's like, I am really very flattered, but we hardly know each other. Which, side note, how many men has she hardly known who she's agreed to marry in the past?
Mhm.
Um, Anyway, back to the scene. The Sultan says to her, but I know you're beautiful, intelligent, and charming. And Fran's like, and I know you're a king. All right, we bonded. And she like pulls away from him. The thing is, I'm really sort of involved with Mr. Sheffield. I mean Maxwell. We are on a first name basis. It's just we don't say it in front of other people is the thing. We've only been together for 5 years. We don't want to rush into these things. Did that sound as pathetic to you as it did to me? And the Sultan's like, the Englishman. What can this man possibly offer you that I can't? And she's like, you're offering me everything that I've ever dreamed of, but I can't stay. I must say no. And he's like, well, I should warn you. I do not give up easily. I'm a man who does not like the answer no. And she's like, well, I'm sure I can't be the first girl to ever say no to you. I mean, what are you going to do? Chop off my head? The camera looks to him and he has this like angry face on. And she's like, I'm kidding.
Yeah, like a serious kind of look he's giving her.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add to that scene?
Nope.
All right, take us back to New York, please.
Okay, so we are back in the Sheffield residence, and it's kind of by the little hallway next to the foyer. Cece and Niles are over there, and Cece notices that Niles is holding a box, and she's like, "What's that?" And Niles explains that it's a present for Mr. Sheffield because his birthday's next week. And Cece's like, "Why didn't you remind me? You're making me look bad." And Niles is like, "No, that's gilding the lily." Um, and in walks Maxwell, and he's asking, has Miss Fine even bothered to call to check on the children? And going on and on about that. And Cece, because he has all this work or whatever, and Cece's like, "Oh, I finished it all so that we could have free time." And Naz is like, "Oh, isn't she a good girl?" And Cece's like, "But I can also be bad," sidling up next to Maxwell, suggestively.
Mm-hmm.
And
Offered
Niles,
super, super awkwardly.
yes, yeah. Niles, though, continues to inform Maxwell that, there's been no postcards either because he was kind of looking through the mail. And Maxwell's lamenting, "What have I done?" And he's like, "Maybe I should just admit I'm wrong and ask for forgiveness." And Cece's immediately like, "No, that'll make you look weak. Um, you should make believe that you're with another woman." And again, she's obviously trying to be seductive in this moment, awkwardly. And she grabs the box from Niles and hands it to Maxwell, saying, "Happy birthday." And Maxwell opens it, and it's an air ticket to Kurdistan. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and Maxwell's like very ecstatic, like, "Oh, thank you." Like, "You are a hopeless romantic," to Cece. Like,
Mm-hmm.
gives her a kiss on the cheek. And and he leaves. And so Niles, of course, snidely says to Cece, you know, um, "I guess you're not the only one who can be bad."
Mm-hmm.
Anything you'd like to add?
Nope. Oh,
Okay.
actually, yeah. Niles, when he says bad, he does the same, like, awkwardly suggestive lowering of his voice. Like, yeah,
That Cece did, yeah.
yeah. So back to Khorasan. They're in Fran's room, and Gracie's protesting that she doesn't want to go home because she's having a blast, and she and Billy are supposed to go for a camel ride later. And Fran's like, "Honey, I've got an Aunt Gert at home with a hump." You can ride her up and down Queens Boulevard all you want once we go home. Go to the Armoire, get all my clothes. I'm gonna get the tickets." And they go in the opposite in separate directions. And Fran asks, "Where are the tickets and the passports?" And Gracie responds, "Fran, all your clothes are gone." "All of them?" And Gracie's like, "Something's not kosher here." And Fran responds, "Honey, nothing's kosher here. All right, listen, you know what? You stay put. I'm going to go talk to the Sultan and find out what's going on. I'll be right back." She opens the door and finds an armed guard posted outside the door. She closes the door. "Honey, I guess he really wouldn't take no for an answer. Boy, I don't want to scare you, sweetie, but I think we're being held hostage here." Oh my God, this is just like that movie, Not Without My Daughter, which personally I think was a poor choice to show in the plane right over here. And they kind of like clutch each other, and yeah, it seems like they're being held hostage.
Mm-hmm.
You want to add
Yeah.
anything?
No.
All right.
Uh,
Would you like to take us to the next scene?
yeah. So we now see Fran and Gracie peek around the corner. And they comment how that guard sure could hold his AK-47, but apparently not his Snapple.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and again, we learn that they're going to pretend to be belly dancers, and then they'll just
Mm-hmm.
waltz out of the palace. So they go, and they're trying to get out, but then one of the stewards or workers in the palace gives the signal, and all the actual belly dancers come dancing out. And so Fran and Gracie get caught up with that. Specifically Fran, right? She's kind of being jostled around, and she eventually just starts dancing as well. But of course, she's not belly dancing. She's kind of
Mm-hmm.
discoing, like because whenever the other dancers are done, they all kind of lower to the ground, but she stays up. So of course the Sultan sees her and asks, "What are you doing?" And she said, staying alive."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Fran's like, of course, like, what is she doing? Like Fran's trying to be like, "Oh, we were just gonna go down and walk around and maybe go to the American embassy." um and basically she's trying to politely get out of this, right? She's trying to cover her butt because she was
Mm-hmm.
obviously trying to escape. But at that moment, we learn that there was a knock, like Maxwell shows up. Apparently, he had just knocked on the palace door. Um, and everybody started like bowing and all that kind of stuff. And that's when we see the Sultan and Maxwell side by side, because someone mentions they look alike, and they're both at the same time says, "I don't see it." And side note, it's the same actor.
Yep. It's
um,
Charles Shaughnessy playing both parts.
exactly. So they've done that split screen type of thing they did like in The Parent Trap, right? Where it's the same actor just filming it twice, I'm assuming, or
Mm-hmm.
however they decided to do
Using a
it.
green screen. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, of course, as soon as Maxwell's there, Fran's flinging herself onto him, and she's talking about how she and Gracie were being held hostage, and the Sultan's like, "Hostage?" Um, you know, and she's like, "Well, yeah, I mean, like our tickets were gone, our
Passports.
passports were," and he's like, "Explain, oh no, they were put in the palace safe because, they could you could get a lot on like the black market for it." And then she's like, "Well, and there was a armed guard in front of our door," and he explains there had been some type of like terrorist threat. And Fran's getting kind of like frustrated, like, "Okay, Mr. Know-it-all, like, how do you put a nougat into a Three Musketeer?" And he starts saying, "Well, it's a three-tiered, like, kind of phase. First you," and he cuts it off. She cuts it off. But anyway, what we learn is that whenever Fran's saying that he wanted to marry her, he's like, "Wife, I wanted you as the nanny." And we learn
Mm-hmm.
he has four wives, and he claims he has no romantic interest. She's free to leave any time. Um, and anyway, uh, He eventually, like, leaves the room, as does everybody else, so it's just, like 'cause, Gracie, in the meantime, wants to go say bye to Billy, while she's still dressed in her garb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Fran turns to Maxwell and is like, "No, like, the king was coming on to me," like, because again, the king made it seem like she was being ridiculous thinking that, and she's like and Max is like, "Of course he was." But some men are just not good at expressing feelings. I see right through the Sultan. First you'd be the nanny, but then you'd get to like the first name basis, and then eventually he'll figure out that you're more important than work, and then he'll tell you he loves you. And
Mm-hmm.
Fran, of course, is like leaning in, like, when? And he goes, right now. And he looks into her eyes and says, I love you. And she goes, what? And he goes, I love you. And they kiss.
They do.
Um, Anything you want to add to that?
No, no,
Okay. Do you have the little
I
last
do. So we see a picture of a big airplane flying, and we just get the audio from like an on-air announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying Coruscant Air. We know you have a choice when you fly, so will the woman in 3B who spent the last 17 hours quelling that her boss finally told her that he loved her, please next time choose Qantas?
Yep.
And that's the episode.
That is the episode.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to talk about before we get into our sticks?
I kind of wanted to ask if you had any opinion or feelings one way or the other regarding Charles Shaughnessy playing the Sultan.
I was going to talk about that in our 90s nostalgia. It just feels very dated to me.
Okay. Yeah. We
How
can
about
we can
you?
hold off on that then.
Okay.
Yeah, because a
Um,
lot of it just feels very stereotyped but okay. Let's just go ahead and get into our shticks then, I think.
oh, I had something I wanted to talk
Oh,
about.
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, in the penultimate scene where Maxwell says, I love you, and Fran says, what? Like, did you think that was the appropriate response from Fran? Like, did that seem within character for her?
I think the fact that it was finally happening was the what. Um
I don't
but
know. Like, this is something she has clearly been thinking about and dreaming about, fantasizing about, wishing would happen for 5 long years now.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate. And I think what they were trying to go for is maybe just like, oh, this is actually happening. you know, there's a difference between like dreaming about it and the reality of it.
I
Um,
guess, but like the way I read it was more like it took her off guard.
mhm.
And like, I just thought, like, after all of her fantasizing and dreaming, that like she would have had something better to say than, what?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
It's
not to pick
it's not
on our
like the
friend Fran.
ideal response, right?
Yeah, it was just anyway. That's all I wanted to talk about.
okay. Okay. So favorite fashion. Did you have any this episode?
I really liked what Fran was wearing in the first scene. She's wearing it's black and white, and she has the white headband and the white turtleneck, and then the black spaghetti strap dress.
Uh
It
huh.
also admittedly felt very 90s.
Uh huh.
I like that. I mean, we have to talk about what like her Middle Eastern garb. I am
Mhm.
not a Middle Eastern scholar,
Uh huh.
but it sort of seemed to me like she had different outfits, which I would have attributed to different parts of the Middle East.
Yeah, that was
Um,
my impression as well.
she looked phenomenal in all of it.
Yeah.
Um, but I particularly liked the dress that she wore when she was dancing with the king, which had like a either like a is it like a pale pink background with like a flower pattern, and she has her head covered, but it's not like but you can still see her hair, and it has these like,
So
I
it's
don't
like a
know.
sheer kind of material.
Yeah. I was gonna say like veil like,
Yeah.
um, but like not covering her face. And it had like flowers, I think, around the the headpiece. I really like that. I also really liked when she dressed up like a belly dancer.
Hmm.
Um, I think those were my favorite pieces of fashion. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with your assessment. That first outfit, I liked it, but it seemed very 90s,
Yeah.
like quintessential. Again, like she looked great in those outfits while she's at the palace, but again, it seemed to me like culturally, like it was just a bunch of different outfits put together.
Hmm.
Again, I am no Middle Eastern scholar, so I can't say for sure. Um, but in terms of the general, like just as a comment, the general garb there for like everybody seemed kind of a stereotypical view of the Middle East.
Hmm.
Uh, so I just wanted to kind of comment on that.
I
But
agree.
yeah, any other fashion you want to discuss?
I don't think so. How about you?
Nope.
All right, notable New Yorkers.
Yeah. So actually, like the title of this episode is not Without My Nanny, and that kind of jumps ahead later to the towards the end where it's Bryn mentions not without my daughter.
Hmm. Which is a 1991 movie about, and I quote, an American woman trapped in Islamic Iran by her brutal husband who must find a way for her and her daughter to escape. And that's according to our friends at imdb.com.
Hmm. Now in terms of like that first scene in the kitchen, um, I only really have like, did you put Gino's pizza
I
rolls?
did. Gino's
Okay.
Pizza Rolls was the predecessor to Totino's Pizza Rolls. It changed its name actually in 1993. And
Oh,
these pizza rolls were originally created in Minnesota in the mid 1960s. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
okay. Did you have anything in that first kitchen scene
I
other
just
than that?
wanted to mention that Kurdistan is, I believe, not a real country.
Yeah, I think it was
Made up.
fabricated for this episode.
Yeah, that was, I say that hesitatingly, even though I did a Google search because I
Hmm.
don't want to offend any of our international audience or domestic audience for that matter if I'm geographically challenged, which I am.
Hmm.
That's all I
Uh,
have for that first
yeah.
scene.
Did you have the Taj Mahal then for
I
the
did.
second?
A
Okay.
marble mausoleum in Uttar Pradesh, India, which was commissioned in 1631 and completed in 1643, which has a mosque, guest house, and formal gardens. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah, we shall
Yep.
skip over. We shall.
The Orange and Chief, the former Orange and Chief.
Yes. Bombay Company.
And I quote from their webpage, a beloved purveyor of fine furnishings and gifts that was established in New Orleans in 1978. That's according to our friends at bombaycompany.com.
Okay. Question: was the reference to Alf the TV show or something else?
I assumed it was the TV show,
Okay.
which it was a television show about Alf, an alien life form who observed the stupidity of humankind. And the television show aired from 1986 until 1990. That's according to our friends at imdb.com.
Mm-hmm. Uh, is Yasmin Bleeth
She's an
someone?
American actress and model who's best known for her role on Baywatch.
Okay. Clueless.
We've talked about previously. It's a movie.
Yeah, and it's actually based off of. Isn't it based off of Emma
I
by
have
Jane
no
Austen?
idea.
I'm pretty sure that like that's a modernized version. Anyway.
Well, according to our friends at asthebunnyhops.com, there's an article titled All the Ways Clueless and Emma Are the Same Movie.
Okay. There we go. Um, Now, did you put, you know, the references to McDonald's, the golden arches and all
Yeah, I
that?
just said it was McDonald's and left it
Okay.
at that.
Yep.
There's also the reference to Hosni Mubarak, who's the former president of Egypt. He was the president of Egypt from 1981 till 2011, I want to say.
Okay.
But I realized, yeah, um,
I think we've talked about Seinfeld before.
we have. Yes.
And we've definitely talked about Roger Clinton since he
Yes,
was in
we
a
have.
previous episode.
Yes,
Um, I don't know. Did you put Diet Pepsi?
I did. It's a diet sugar-free carbonated soda that was introduced in 1964. Before that, it was actually introduced under a different name in 1963. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. We've already talked about the movie Not Without My Daughter.
Uh,
Did you? Sorry, go ahead.
Queens Boulevard. It's actually a major thoroughfare that connects Midtown Manhattan and Jamaica, Queens. And that's
Okay.
according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Did you put AK-47 or Snapple?
AK-47 is an assault rifle. I left it at that.
Yeah.
Snapple is an American beverage company that was founded in New York. That's according to our friends at snapple.com.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Um, we've have we talked about the song "Staying Alive" by the Bee Gees before?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
maybe. We've talked
I
about
don't.
other songs by the Bee Gees. I just
Mhm.
noted that Staying Alive was a Bee Gees song from the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. That's according
Mhm.
to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Um.
There was a reference to a Three Musketeers bar.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a chocolate candy bar, which was originally produced starting in 1932, and it was originally sold in packages with 3 bars, hence the name the Three Musketeers.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah,
Did you have anything else?
Qantas.
Okay.
Qantas is the third oldest continuously operating airline with the largest fleet size, and that's according to our
Huh.
friends at Wikipedia.
Did not know that.
See, you learn all kinds of new things when you do a podcast.
Exactly. Anything else in that category?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So then, Yidishakop. We had a couple.
We had more than a couple. So in
Mm.
the first scene, Fran warns Maxwell that if he sends her to the desert, he should beware because our people tend to dilly dally there.
Mhm.
That is a reference to the Passover story. Passover is coming up in the not so distant future, so it's on my mind. That basically, after the Israelite slaves were freed from Egypt, they wandered in the desert for 40 years before finding the promised land, aka
Mhm.
Israel. Um, in the second/third scene where we're in Khorasan, Fran references that at 117 degrees, anyway you look at it, it's a schwitz. Schwitz as a verb means to sweat. As a noun, it's a place to perspire. It's a place where you go,
Okay.
like a sauna, like a place
Okay.
to schwitz. We already talked about the spinning over your fingers. That's a response to something very good or something evil. But no one really knows where that custom started. There are multiple references to the Khorasan shekel. The shekel is actually the basic monetary unit of modern Israel. And that's according to our friends at Oxford Languages. Um, Sylvia refers to the Sultan as a yutz, which is, and I quote, a stupid, unthinking, or socially inept person, which makes sense in the context because obviously Sylvia's clearly pulling for Maxwell, the man, the handsome millionaire who is close to his son to her. Um, we also have the reference to kosher, which
Mhm.
technically translates to fit for consumption, but now it basically means something that's acceptable or permissible when it's used in English. And then the last one I had was kvelling, which is basically to gush proudly or happily. It's a
Mhm.
positive thing, usually. So
Nice.
kvetching is the opposite. So yeah,
Um,
did I miss any?
I don't think so.
Okay, awesome. I think that's the most we've had in quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like the last couple of episodes we didn't really have too much.
Great.
Okay. So some 90s nostalgia.
Well, we've already started to talk about how it feels very dated to have Charles Shaughnessy play both parts, both
Yeah.
his usual role of Maxwell and the Sultan of Khorasan. To me, that felt very dated, and I feel like that would not have in casting a show. They would not do that now for
Hmm.
because it would be seen as cultural appropriation.
Yeah. And I would say too, like just how stereotypical like the Middle Eastern scenes are, like in terms
Mm-hmm.
of garb and setting and all of that kind of stuff. Um, again, it seems very much feeding into stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
regarding everything like that. But also then, like, the paper plane ticket that Max
Yep.
will get in the box. I mean, you can still get printed out boarding passes, but these days too, you can just put it on your phone.
Unless you have a special request or something, then you need to check in person and get a paper boarding pass. For example, if you're flying with a pet.
Oh, okay.
So you learn things.
Mhm.
Um, I'll just throw this out there. Old cars.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and again, Fran has her camera
Yep.
and she's on a timer and she talks about, printing out copies as mementos. Um, Definitely if this were set here today, she would be posting all over social media.
Yep.
Like Maxwell would not be wondering about postcards for her calling, right? Um,
Correct. That's right. Did you notice the old phones that were used? So Sylvia uses the Sheffield's, old cordless phone, and
mhm,
Fran uses what looks like an old, intentionally old-fashioned corded phone in her suite at the palace.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. Honestly, kind of when she was like in that during that scene, it almost seemed a little bit like I Dream of Jeannie when like
Yes.
Jeannie's like in her bottle and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
But
I see that.
yeah. So Maggie and Brighton fighting over the TV. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, especially given that their dad's a millionaire, these days they
Yeah.
definitely have their own like smartphones or like iPads or whatever, and the kids stream whatever they wanted to on their own.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I mean, I think we've covered everything I wanted to. I noted that this entire episode just felt dated. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so
Okay.
yeah.
I'll let you do the next one.
Aw, thank you. We get to add to the kiss count. We were
Mhm,
previously at 35, and they go and kiss after he tells her that he loves her. So we get to add one. So we're now
mhm.
up to 3 dozen, aka 36.
Yay.
Go Fran and Max.
Yep.
It's only taken us almost 5 full seasons to get here.
Yep. But we finally got to some I love yous
Uh-huh.
that are anyway, some future fun.
Future fun. Yeah, I'll pick up where you just left off. So first, on the bright side, I want to say that Maxwell does not take it back this time.
Woo!
So he actually means it this time. I mean, I think he meant it then too, but he doesn't walk it back this time. Um, that said, not everything is smooth sailing from here on out. Um, so next time we're all together, Maxwell is going to have a very important question to ask Fran. But just because nothing ever goes smoothly for them, it seems. Um, the asking is imperfect, but although this time it's actually not really his fault. He just made a poor decision, which put himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And anyway, it ends up being fine. She says yes, by the way. Um, let's see, other ways that things do not go as anticipated without giving too much away. Maxwell's father dies rather suddenly, and he ends up leaving the bulk of his estate to Concepcion, his as as up till then unknown love child, depriving Maxwell and his full siblings of their inheritance.
Mm.
Um, the next time that uh, Fran and Maxwell take an international trip together, it shall we say does not go as anticipated. Um, that includes them getting stranded on a deserted island after going overboard on a cruise.
Oh wow.
Um,
Yeah, that that's definitely not what people plan for, right?
yeah, there's another point at which another episode in which Sylvia and Morty move in with the Sheffields, which doesn't go very well. And like actively not picking certain things that would give other things away. Um, Maggie gets caught in bed with her boyfriend and thinks she's pregnant. Um, yeah, Fran tries to help Maxwell cast a show using Sammy's nephew. It does not go well. Um, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Maxwell and his brother get into a fight over Fran. Yeah. Anyway, there.
Okay.
It's not all smooth sailing, but hey, at least Maxwell has said he loves her and is not taking it back this time.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. Okay. So now's the time that we do our episode ratings. As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. It's arbitrary. It's subjective. It's, for fun. So we reserve the right to adjust it at a later time. But for this week, Debbie, you get to go first.
Gosh, I was afraid of that. Um, I really don't know. I mean, this, as we've talked about, this entire episode feels dated and
Hmm.
overly stereotypical. It's weird that Charles Shaughnessy plays both Maxwell and the Sultan. Um, yeah, I'm on the one hand torn. Like, I do not like those things about it. I do not like the joke about them being held hostage. Um, I just There are a lot of things about it I do not like. But on the other hand,
Hmm.
Maxwell told Fran he loved her, and
Yeah.
I've already let it out of the bag that he is not taking it back.
Hmm.
Um, so that weighs heavily in favor of liking the episode. Um,
Hmm.
this is not an episode that I go out of my way to rewatch. Fortunately or not, it is sandwiched between episodes that I like better. Um, so I'm sort of torn. I obviously do not like it as much as Call Me Fran. Um, there are things that weigh against it. I think I'm just going to be diplomatic and give it a 4. How about you,
Okay.
Bernadette?
Uh, that's exactly my difficulty with this episode is that again, I for all the things you mentioned, right? Like just the stereotypes, the I don't know, I don't like that.
Mhm.
And then the last 2 minutes of the episode is like, oh, progress. Great. So uh, I think again, it's a struggle, but I think I also will give it a 4
Okay.
because again, the majority of this is very awkward, but then
Hmm.
the last 2 minutes is like the saving grace, right?
Exactly.
Without
Like,
that, it'd be a lot lower, right?
yeah,
Um,
I feel like they could have gotten Maxwell to say "I love you" in easier to believe ways,
yeah,
easier to stomach ways, if you will.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but anyway, unfortunately, we were not writers on The Nanny. We would have been
Nope.
very gifted if we had been.
Yep.
Um, but
Prodigies.
exactly. Um, so yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next time when we'll be discussing episode 116, The Engagement.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.